Hello, everyone, and welcome to Theme Park Workshop. My name is Kelley, and I am joined here today by my co-hosts, Adam Johnson
Hello, everyone. How you doing?
and Bella Harvey.
Hi from the temporary setup from my phone.
And we are joined by a special guest today, my dad and patron, Duane Daiker.
Hi, glad to be here.
So, real quick, I wanted to mention that the episode is, of course, brought to you by our patrons, Landon Kanoki, Jonathan Edouard, Jordan Buster, Greg Harvey, Joshua Gonzalez, and Rachel Sprague, and Duane and Teresa Daiker, one of which is here today to talk with you. Little bit about my dad, and I'll let him introduce himself as well, but he is no stranger to podcasts. He actually has his own podcast and has been a guest on many podcasts, so is definitely responsible for, in part, my love of podcasts as well as my love of theme parks. Actually, he's been going to theme parks for a long time. I'll let him tell you about that, and is the one who brought me for the first time, along with my mom and my sister. So yeah, it's really cool to have you on here and talking about one of our favorite movie trilogies, in a sense, because they inspired this ride. I actually re-watched them recently, and if you either haven't seen them or haven't seen them in a long time, I would definitely recommend watching them because they are just such a blast. They go together really well as a trilogy, and they inspired a fantastic ride that I went on back in the day. It was a attraction that opened in 1991, I believe, in Orlando. It was actually featured in Universal Studios Florida, Universal Studios Hollywood, and Universal Studios Japan. And it was like a mini sequel to Back to the Future Part 3 that featured our good old Biff as the villain, and then Doc Brown, of course, as our hero. And it got to take us into some really interesting situations that we're going to talk about. If you're not familiar with where this attraction was located, it was replaced by the Simpsons ride. So the Simpsons area was Back to the Future. You can still see right behind the Bumbleman taco truck. And if you're watching on YouTube, featured behind me here, the DeLorean and the train from the third movie are still available in the park. You can also see Doc Brown wandering around and chat with him about whatever hijinks he's up to. So, Dad, why don't you tell us a little bit about your history with theme parks, as well as your history with this ride?
Sure. Unsurprisingly, we've always loved theme parks. My wife, Teresa, and I, your mom, we've always loved theme parks, and always seems like when you guys were growing up, we always had a pass somewhere to Disney or Universal. I actually went to Disney for the first time, I think it was 1975. I have vague recollections only because there are photos of me in like a lime green jumpsuit, waiting in line for different attractions. I remember being scared to death of the Haunted Mansion and refusing to go. But a lot of Disney memories. I was there the day that they opened Thunder Mountain and got to go on it the first day that it opened, right behind the press train. That was really cool. And, remember Epcot opening and MGM Studios, now Hollywood Studios. So, yeah, we have a long history with the parks. And as far as the movie goes, Back to the Future is one of my favorite trilogies. I mean, it's hard to say between that and Star Wars, but as trilogies go, uh, either number one or number two for me. So I've always loved this ride.
So I mentioned that I had gone on the ride several times, and I do still remember it, but it's been a hot minute since it closed in 2007. So I wanted to ask Adam and Bella, starting with Adam, kind of what's your history with this ride, if you have any?
I have virtually no history with the ride. I only say virtually because it was still standing when I first started going to Universal, but it had been closed down. All the signage was removed, but the building was still blue, and it had not been Springfield or Simpsonized yet. The International Food and Film Festival was still there, but my parents had definitely done it before my brother and I started going with them. And they speak well about the attraction, but they always said like, oh, it was a good ride. It was just really rough by the end of it. And that was really my connection to it. But I also love, didn't like grow up with the movies, but I certainly like watched the movies young and really enjoyed them. And the score is fantastic. And it's just a really great series. So there's definitely that feeling of I almost wish I went like a year earlier so I could have experienced this ride. I probably would have been too scared for this if I was too scared of Star Tours, for crying out loud. But yeah, I just missed it. I just missed it.
I virtually have zero experience with the ride or the movie because I was just a wee child when the ride closed. I was 5 when it closed, so I went to Universal for the first time when I was like 13, I think. So very new to Universal still, and I have only seen the first movie, shockingly, when I was maybe early teens. So I don't really remember it, but it's one of those like, when you have like a franchise or like a popular thing that you missed out on and you're like, ugh, why don't I like get it? Why don't I get it? That's like Back to the Future thing because it's so beloved and like I want to like love it, but I just need to like sit down on a weekend and just like marathon them all because I like everyone that loves Back to the Future loves Back to the Future. And I want that to be me. Like, when is it my turn? So maybe this weekend after this, I will be marathoning all of them because from what I've heard about this ride, it seems cool. I'm excited to learn a little bit more about Back to the Future and this ride.
Well, some people hope that with the rumored closure of Simpsons next year when their contract is up, and presumably they either don't want to pay Disney or Disney doesn't want to give it to them, whether they would use it in their parks or not. But some people are hoping that Back to the Future comes back. And while that would be my best case scenario, I don't see it happening. But one can dream. But you should definitely watch the movies, Bella, because they are so good and they're all on streaming. But I just watched them like a couple weeks ago again, before I did the Scare Zone. Or I'm sorry, I said Scare Zone. It's not at Halloween Horror Nights. The Escape Room. You can see where my brain is, which we'll talk about later in the episode. But Dad, if you wanted to kind of talk to us about, for those of you at home, I mentioned this is a simulator ride, but there's been quite a history of simulators before and after this. And it's kind of interesting to hear about, where this ride sort of ranked or the impact that it had on that type of ride during its time.
I sort of lived through this, right? And I guess I should have said before that I've been going on this ride since it opened in 1991. I can't remember how soon after it opened we went, but pretty soon. There's still a lot of hype. And, I remember before there were simulator rides at theme parks, and really the first simulator ride that made a splash, at least as far as I remember, was Star Tours at Disney. And it was closely followed. That was like 1987. And then a couple of years later, they got Body Wars, which was in Epcot. And they were both used the same ride technology. They were kind of a rectangular box on these, arms that made it move. And you sat inside the box, and the front of it was a screen that was probably, I don't know, like a 96-inch screen or something. I mean, not very big by today's standards. And you watched the movie and the box shook around, and you were seatbelted in because it moved pretty good. And people were thrilled with it because it was like the newest thing. It was very cool. But a lot of people got sick on those. I think sometimes it felt claustrophobic. You had a seatbelt that was real tight across your midsection, and it did move around a lot. And some people didn't like, especially Body Wars got a really bad reputation for making people sick because it was kind of violent. But so when Back to the Future opened, it was like a whole new generation of simulator rides. It was totally different. Instead of being inside a box, we're getting a little bit ahead of describing the ride, but the ride was a ride car that would actually lift up into a dome, and it was open air, and so you're in a huge indoor space with this movie all around you. And not only was it way more immersive and made you feel like you were there, but you also didn't feel like you were trapped in a box. And I think people that got sick on some of those other rides didn't get that same problem. So it was that was what made Back to the Future so exciting, is it was a completely new ride technology that was so much better than what we had before.
If I'm remembering correctly, it's pretty much the same technology that's in the Simpsons ride now, that people are used to, where you lift up into that dome.
Yeah, it's exactly the same technology. They changed the the intellectual property around it, and they changed the appearance of the car. But yeah, essentially, you go into a room, and there's the ride vehicle, which is on like a scissor lift kind of thing, and through some magic of you don't really realize it's happening, it lifts you up, I don't know, 10 or 12 feet into this dome, and the movie is projected on the dome all around you. And if you are sitting in the front of the ride car and you kind of look where you're not supposed to look, you peer around, you can see that there's actually in Orlando, I think there's 3 cars in each dome. I think when they did this ride other places, they might have added a 4th. But if you were sitting in the front and you kind of leaned forward and looked around the edge of the car, you could actually see the other cars in the dome. It kills the the effect, but you could see what was going on. But yeah, so they took the same technology and just changed the IP around it for Simpsons.
Yeah, and there's actually there's a couple of similarities between the two rides, which we'll get into. But just a quick synopsis for those who have not been on it. And Dad, you can add more details if you want. I'm basically going off the wiki and some memory, but mostly YouTube. There's a really good ride through that I'll have Adam add to the show notes for those at home if you kind of want to see after you listen to this or before what the experience is like. Basically, we're going to Doc's Institute of Future Technology, and I believe the plot is that he's trying to take us one day into the future just to kind of see what it's like to go into the space-time continuum and journey into the future. And it's supposed to be very reminiscent. It kind of reminds me of, Dinosaur, another ride that's soon to be extinct, unfortunately. But where they're like, oh, we're taking you back to the early Cretaceous period. No, actually, we're doing this. It's kind of like that, where it's like, oh, no, we're just going a day in the future. Just kidding. We have a whole disaster, as theme park rides tend to do, where they're like, just kidding, you're saving the world every single ride you go on. So in this case, we have to save the space-time continuum because Biff, no good Biff Tannen, stows away at the IFT and tries to locate the DeLorean, which of course causes mayhem for all of us. So basically he steals a time machine, Biff, and does a little joyride through time, and due to circumstances, we are the only ones that can go get him with our with our technology that we're supposed to be just testing out for a little quick spin around the space-time. But there's a great, like I said, a great video that kind of goes through. You'll get to see the the intro video and then a little safety video with like dummies, very test track original-esque. And then it gets into the ride, which Dad, before we get into the ride experience, what are your thoughts on the pre-show and the queue and all of the entrance things?
Yeah, I was just going to comment on the story that it really does, and I think it's maybe one of the first, but it starts to set that pattern, right? Of here you are for something that's routine, oops, something goes wrong, the world is threatened, you guys are the only ones who can save it, so you're going to have to take the ride. Like, that is duplicated on a lot of rides, right? This might have been the first time that they sort of followed that pattern. But yeah, the pre-show was really interesting on this ride. First of all, when you're in the line sort of snaked up and down with some ramps and stuff. So that was a little bit different. The ride queue was different. There were TVs along the way that were showing scenes from Back to the Future trilogy. So you actually, even though Michael J. Fox, Marty is not in the ride, you did see him in the footage that was shown beforehand. So it's sort of, getting you up to speed. And then one of the things I think that makes this ride different than a lot of simulator rides is once you got inside the building, they split you up into your groups. Each car held 8 people, and those 8 people went into a room alone. So a lot of times the pre-show, you're in a big room, with everybody, and then you get loaded onto your cars. In this ride, they split you up for the pre-show, and you actually went into a room where you were standing there in the room, with the car. The doors weren't open yet, and you got that. You got the whole pre-show, movie. And the movie's great, right? Because they brought back the original characters. They've got Doc Brown, they've got Biff, they've got Einstein. Now, he may or may not be the original Einstein. I'm not sure about that. But it was only, this ride came out, I think, 1 year after Back to the Future 3. So it kind of felt like a natural progression. You almost felt like, the actors hadn't aged, everything still looked right. And it kind of felt like you were watching Back to the Future 4.
That's so cool. Yeah. And for those of you, again, who have been on Simpsons but may not have been on this ride, you'll notice that as far as the building and the setup, not a lot has changed. It's got the snaking ramps. It's got the TVs. Obviously in the Simpsons case, it's showing like clips from the show. And then you go into those separate rooms, which I think is really cool that they did it like that. And that's really interesting that it, is kind of the first one to do something like that. And I feel like still today, there's not a ton of rides. I mean, I can think of a few where you do something like that. Like, for example, Smuggler's Run. You go into, it's not a room, I guess, but it's like a hallway where it's just I think 6 people, and you're watching a small, pre-show on a screen. But I can't think of a ton of rides where it does something like that. So it's definitely, I guess, Mission Space does something like that as well. I'm sure people listening at home can think of even more, but that's really cool. And if I remember correctly, Dad, this is one of your favorite theme park rides of the past, but also in general. Is that right?
Yes. I'm sure a lot has to do with the IP. I just love the story, but like I said, it was so groundbreaking. It was so exciting when it came out, and I guess you never really lose that, enthusiasm for it.
Yeah. So as far as the ride experience, we touched on briefly that you get into these cars, held about 8 people, goes up to, the dome basically. And now we go on this adventure and we're trying to stop Biff Tannen. And it's a lot of Doc Brown and Biff Tannen. And I don't know if we mentioned, but it is the original actors, of course, which is, I think you said that, Dad, which is great. And did you want to talk about the ride experience a little bit and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely. Again, it starts right here. The door to the car, it looks for all the world like they say it's an 8-passenger DeLorean convertible because it has no roof. The door swings open like a real gull-wing door, on a DeLorean, and you get in for 2 rows with 4 people each. Inside, there was a lot of detail inside the car. There was a video monitor that was showing something different than what was surrounding you on the screen. It was either Doc or Biff when he's talking to you. There was also a flux capacitor that was glowing and, animated. And then there was the 3 date readout, that we're all familiar with from the movie, with the dates of where you're going and where you've been. And one of the dates was the date that the ride opened. It was the 1955 date, it was the 2015 date, and the 1991 date that the ride opened. So it feels like a car. The door closes, and then they do a great effect where both when the ride starts, when the ride ends, you never really know that the ride is lifting up into a dome because you get hit with some smoke, as an effect or whatever. And by the time the smoke clears, you're up in the dome and the movie is around you. And it's the same at the end. The car kind of skids to a stop, and the character on the movie screen comes up with a fire extinguisher and starts spraying it. And then real smoke comes out, and, obscures everybody's view until the car goes back down. So they really did a great job of hiding the ride mechanics, so you had no idea what was going on. It felt very, very real. But so the movie itself, the story itself is being projected, so it's all around you. So you're in this car, but you've got a view like straight up. It's got high sides because they don't want you to see the cars next to you, but you've got sort of a fairly panoramic view and above you, and you're chasing Biff, through time. The plot is that you have to smash your time machine. He's in the original time machine that he's stolen from the Institute, and you have to smash the time machines together at 88 miles per hour to cause a time vortex to bring the ride cars back to the vehicles back to the Institute. And so at first you find yourself, there's a time tracker, so the car will follow Biff, and you wind up in the horrible future of 2015, which even then, that was 1991. 2015 seemed like a long time. By the time the ride closed in 2007, it wasn't that far away, but it looks very futuristic, in the movie. Maybe that didn't age super well. And then something happens, and you wind up in like a prehistoric ice age hill valley, because you have an interaction with a dinosaur, with a T-Rex that kind of swallows the car and then spits it out. And then ultimately you manage to, smash the time vehicle. Oh, and here's another thing that happens all the time. At one point, the time machine, the engine fails, and you start falling, into this well on the planet, which is very Spider-Man-esque, right? And I think other rides, that's another common theme, that the ride, the vehicle loses power and you're falling, and then all of a sudden you get power back. So a lot of these themes, I think, started with this ride, and then the vehicles collide and you wind up back at the Institute. But in the meantime, there's a lot of moving of the car. It's synced really well with the video, and it really does give a great feeling of motion. And that's a little bit rough. You've got a lap bar, it tosses you around a little bit. Some people didn't like it, but it was great. It was a great experience. Very cool.
Yeah. For some other comparisons to, what's there now with The Simpsons, there's some flying through signs. I can't remember exactly which ones, but in The Simpsons, of course, the donut is the one that you think of. There's also the dinosaur. At one point you end up in the dinosaur's mouth, which I feel like is very, that's why they do the whole giant Maggie and you're the pacifier thing. But it's just funny that you can kind of listen to some of the things, and if you were to watch it, you'd see like, or the falling. It's kind of like when you fall into, I mean, I think it's supposed to be like hell, in The Simpsons, but you fall kind of through the floor, and it's very similar to the falling, and then something saves you, and it's pretty cool.
It almost makes me think that they cheaped out by not wanting to reprogram the motion of the simulator, and that I wonder if the program movement is actually the same for Back to the Future and for Simpsons. I wonder if they built the Simpsons movie around the motion that was already, somebody probably knows the answer to that, but I wonder if that's the case.
I don't know if it's the case, but I think it's interesting too, because I think the Fantastic World of Hanna-Barbera and Jimmy Neutron's Nicktoon Blast had a very similar quick turnaround, and those are very similar, I think, with the exception of the chicken dance. But if I'm remembering the ride films right, it's kind of the same path and the same motion. Minnie and Mayhem was like the first full break from. It's pretty different from the Nicktoon Blast one. So I think you got a point there.
Another big difference is that the Back to the Future ride was actually filmed with real practical effects. I mean, it was filmed in miniature, as opposed to Simpsons, obviously, is all animated. And nowadays, everything would be, digital special effects and that sort of thing. But the Back to the Future is actually formed in miniature. And apparently, I have never seen this, and now I'm sorry that I never got to look, but apparently there is a error somewhere in the script or in the video where you can see a styrofoam coffee cup that is sitting amongst the buildings that was accidentally filmed there, and nobody caught it before it went to the final. So if you know where to look, apparently there's a way out of proportion styrofoam cup somewhere in the 1955 Hill Valley.
That's pretty cool. Well, and I love that it was practical effects because I just feel like that. I mean, maybe the video quality won't, but generally that kind of stuff holds up so well, and it's also so interesting. Um, I always love when they use practical effects. Like, for example, I love like the practical effects they use at Horror Nights, like with the puppets and things like that. So the fact that they filmed it in miniature, I actually didn't know that. That's pretty cool.
I also noticed as I was rewatching the video today that so much of the, and I guess I'm talking maybe more about the pre-show here too, but you could tell that the writing and the scripting was done by the same people because it has very much the same feel. The dialogue sounds the same. I mean, it's corny. It's cornier than the movies because it's a ride. But I wrote down, one of the things Biff is known for in the movies is messing up common sayings, right? So he has a bunch of these in the video. He says, "Quiet as a rat. Have a nice trip. See you next winter." There's one, "Oh, hasta la bye bye." He's got some new original memorable lines in the movie. So I think they just did I know Spielberg was involved. I don't know who did the writing, but it was very, the whole story was very well done. I mean, it's kitschy, it's corny, theme park ride, but you could tell it was done by the people who were involved in the original.
You're exactly right. The writer of it is actually Peyton Reed, who we know nowadays from like the Ant-Man movies, but he was also a writer on the Back to the Future TV show for the Doc Brown live action segments, so which came out the same year as the ride. So just plopped it right in.
As someone who's never even been on obviously Back to the Future or Simpsons, now I like want to go ride it and like compare like Back to the Future because you said it's like similar and like the cute. Like now I want to like actually go ride Simpsons because I've never like cared about it. But now I'm like, wait, that's really interesting and really cool that they just like took it and just like completely like overlaid. I mean, I guess it's like basic, that's what they always do. But like, I don't know, that's so cool. It's such a piece of like universal history.
Well, and Kelley, I guess it goes to your point is they could probably bring this ride back fairly easily. I imagine that the programming, the simulator, and that kind of stuff is probably one of the hardest parts. So if they really didn't change the programming that much, they'd have to do a lot of physical work on restoring the building, but maybe it wouldn't be that bad to bring it back, if it hasn't changed on the inside that much, technologically speaking.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I think it would be kind of interesting because I understand they probably don't want to rebuild an entire Back to the Future land just because, maybe it won't be something that brings in huge crowds overall. I know there's all kinds of rumors about what kind of IPs they might replace it with. And I know they want to do, the new and, not that Back to the Future is not still relevant. We'll talk about that later, but I would love to see them bring it back for a temporary thing. So, to get rid of this whole entire section of the park is going to be a huge overhaul and take away, a lot of, it's going to take away a lot of food service and a ride, several rides actually too, I believe, and games. There's a lot of stuff they'll be getting rid of for probably a while. So I think it'd be kind of interesting if maybe while they're working on other stuff like the restaurant or other things, they have that under construction, they don't really even need to bring back the building. They could kind of just put up a sign or something and bring back the ride, and they could have the ride. And it could sort of be like hey, you only have however many months or a year or whatever to get back here to ride this. It's like a celebration, like they've done with Soarin' Over California. They brought it back for a couple of months to say, hey, it's our such and such anniversary. We're bringing this back as like a nostalgic relic that you can ride again. And if you want to ride it, you have to go during these months. So it'd be kind of interesting, like, hey, this is your last chance. You didn't get to ride it. We have all these other areas of the park that have Back to the Future. You can ride this for, let's say, 6 months or whatever, and it can get people like you, Dad, that are nostalgic for it and would love to ride it again. But it could also get people like Adam and Bella who never got the chance to ride it and are interested. So I think that's a great idea. Universal, I know you're listening, so you should definitely do this. But yeah, it's and Bella, definitely you'll want to ride it before they close down this area, because who knows if they're going to continue this ride vehicle. Not everybody enjoys it. It's obviously not a modern vehicle anymore. I could definitely see them going away with it and doing something, whether it's more like, Spider-Man or something like that, or like Forbidden Journey, where it's got the physical and screens and it kind of moves around the show building, or if they would do like just a show in there. I mean, there's a lot of different things they could do with the building. But who knows if they'll do this ride style again. I kind of see them changing it. So I totally think they should bring it back for a temporary amount of time, not just because I want to go on it, but because I think it would be really cool, instead of just having an entire area just completely closed off in the middle of the park for so long.
As someone who has a whole long, huge list of things that I haven't done at Universal, I feel like if they are, gonna get rid of it within the next year or 2 years, I feel like I need to ride it. And I think bringing it back for like a short amount of time, just like how they did with Soarin', I think that would be a good goodbye to the area if it does go, kind of honor the past of it. I would, after hearing all this, I want to ride it. Like, why was I 5 years old when it closed? Like, I want to do this. Can someone get me like back? Well, no, that wouldn't work. I was gonna say, can someone get me back to the future? But no, it doesn't work like that. Back to the past, you know what I mean? Like, I want to do this.
I like the idea of bringing it back as a nostalgic thing, because it can't go forward as something new, right? I mean, this ride technology has passed us by. They're not going to convert it into something else that's, that works like this. That, I consider this to be like the second gen of simulator rides. With Star Tours and Body Wars was the first. This is like the second gen, along with Soarin'. Soarin's the same kind of technology, showing a movie on a giant, dome. But now we're into what I would call the third gen, which is like Spider-Man, at Universal, where you've got moving ride cars, and you can so many different one. I guess Ratatouille, so many different more. So many different effects you can do when you're actually moving the car and riding them around. So I think the technology is really cool as a vintage thing. It's not cutting edge anymore, but it sure was 20 years ago.
For sure. Yeah. I really hope that they do something like that. I wonder if they've even thought about that. Just with the movies have certainly resurged in popularity. I think they've kind of always been popular. But certainly at Universal, they've really started to come back. Obviously we talked about, we've had the DeLorean and the train from DeLoreans from all the movies, train from the third. And Doc Brown, I'm sure, has been wandering around since the 90s. I don't know if they had any hiatus where he wasn't there, but I mean, he's been there as long as I can remember. And it's sort of built into a legacy, if you will, where the summer tribute store this year and in other years as well has had Back to the Future merchandise and props and scenes, and there's literally, you can buy Back to the Future merchandise right now. But there was a whole room, and I think it was last summer's tribute store in 2023, a whole section where they had all kinds of stuff like the hoverboard and all the theming and music and everything, and you could really step into the big speaker that Marty uses in the movie. So it was just like you could step in and be a part of that, which was cool. And it was like, if you've never been to a tribute store, it's not a regular retail store. This is like, they build sets, and they're known for their Horror Nights ones, but they've done Christmas tribute stores now and the summer tribute stores, which have all been insanely popular. So that was last year, and this year Universal Mega Movie Parade, which we talked about a couple episodes ago, and that Bella can give a little bit more thoughts on, but they, they have an entire float and scene and characters from the movies, and then Cinesational as well, which is the nighttime spectacular, has had, they have a section with the music and the DeLorean and scenes. So it's had quite a presence in the park, and I think that they could certainly bring it back. But I know you love the parade, Bella.
I do. And I really love the Back to the Future float. As someone who has said at the beginning of this episode that I know literally nothing about Back to the Future, on opening day, when that float turned the corner, I literally almost hit the floor seeing Doc Brown and Marty McFly. Like, I don't know why. I just like wanted to cry and like scream. It was so cool. And like every time I see it, it's just so cool to see them. And it's just like, it's so cool. It has the dates on both sides. And I don't know what the mall means, but the mall's there too. And like it plays, I feel like I wish I knew more about Back to the Future, but this is giving me purpose and a meaning to go know all the lore. It's so cool seeing classic movies and classic franchises have such a life and introducing new fans to it, like I'm sure I'm about to be. It's just really cool seeing the legacy that it's had in Universal specifically.
Yeah, and then with Cinesational, just to be able to see like the iconic scenes and hear the music, and just with the water effects and the lighting and everything straight in the middle of the park, was just the coolest experience. And then Adam and I both have recently gotten to do the escape room that they have, Out of Time, Back to the Future Out of Time. And Adam, I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, because we won't go into heavy spoilers, but it does feature a lot of iconic scenes. And Dad, I totally think we should go do that. And don't worry that I've done it before. I really wasn't that helpful to my group, so I could still do it again. But it was just so cool to see those scenes as well, and I wanted to hear your thoughts.
For someone who hasn't been on the ride, simply because just missed it, it's cool to go through that escape, as I call it, an escape adventure, but the escape room, because it is in continuity with the ride. It takes place like 2 years after the ride, and similar to the ride and to the films, it is a time traveling adventure. You're going all over to stop Biff. Very similar to the ride. The Institute of Future Technology is still a thing. Doc Brown's got an assistant. They're all working on making time travel more accessible and more responsible all the time as well. What I love about it, and it did recently have an update to the gameplay. A lot of the puzzles were overhauled, which I don't think Jurassic World has, because that was pretty well received. Back to the Future was not well received by a lot of folks the first time around, because even though it is very immersive, I love the sets. I love, without going into spoilers, if you are a fan of the films, a fan of the franchise, you're going to love every room, because this whole franchise is celebrated and featured in here. It is very immersive, as we expect from Universal, right? It's like a Horror Nights maze without the scary people and without actors and everything. It's just like being in those worlds that Universal can only create. But with the overhauled puzzles, it really is more collaborative. It is more folks in the party are involved, and they're challenging to figure out. There's a challenge to them, but also like it's simpler to get to the solution than it was before, or certainly less time consuming. Like it might take a while to find the solution, but once you get that solution, it's like, okay, let's do it. Whereas before, if you didn't figure out the solution, you'd be timed out, and it was very annoying, and you might let Doc Brown down. And a cool thing about the escape adventures too is that, well, it could be cool, it could be not cool. It depends on it's what makes it different from an escape room that you might normally do, is that you will experience the ending. You will get the full story, so to say. You're not going to lose out on a year or lose out on a pivotal story point if you fail a puzzle. with Universal's great movie escape, they just want to keep you going in, and then you come back, and then you can see what happens if you get that puzzle right, or get a different combination of solutions, if you will. But I've done it twice. Obviously, liked it better the second time. I mean, as I mentioned before, it is very immersive. It is great fan service. Christopher Lloyd returns as Doc Brown. Just a vocal performance. You see him in silhouette. But they did manage to get Christopher Lloyd to return. And even though he does sound like Christopher Lloyd in 2022, which I think is when it opened, or 2021, and he does sound much older than he did in the original ride or the original films, it is just really fun to know that he is there and he is still involved, and he sounds like he's having a blast returning as Doc Brown. It's definitely something that I recommend people to do. I recommended Kelley do it as soon as I got out, because I know how much this ride means to the both of you as a family. I'm like, y'all need to do this because it really is a special thing now.
Yeah, I ended up doing it really quickly on a whim for a friend's birthday, and it was just really interesting. I honestly would love to try it again, because I really was paying more attention to the sets than the puzzles, because we had 8 of us, and it's kind of hard when you have 8 people in those small sets trying to, not everyone can do something. So I was just there for a good time. But I did think it was kind of fun when I was doing my research on the ride that there's 4 levels of, what your title is based on how many puzzles you figure out. And the second highest is Chief Inventive Officer, which is the title that they give Doc Brown on the ride for the Technology Institute. So I thought that was kind of a fun callback.
I didn't notice I was a time travel pioneer both times, just saying.
So much cooler than me.
I try.
I really want to go do those escape adventures. I just walked into the building for the first time on Sunday to refill my water bottle. But I need to do them. I forget it exists. And they're added to the list of stuff I haven't done at Universal. We should all do it. The 4 of us. Let's go. Let's go do it.
I would love that.
That would be awesome. The last thing I was going to say about the ride, I had forgotten before, is one of my favorite parts of the ride was the final joke, which is after the ride is over and the doors open and you think, you've seen the last of the ride. Doc Brown's voice is still coming out over the speakers and he's saying, hurry up, you need to get out, which is you would expect. And then he says, if you don't hurry, you're likely to run into yourself coming in. Which I thought was great. It's a great little final parting time travel joke.
Oh, that's awesome. And it's also such a callback to the movies where, of course, one of the core things with time travel is it's very important not to interact with your previous self. So if you're a fan of the movies, you're like, oh, wow, I better go. I mean, of course, you're probably laughing because it's not really going to happen, but that's a really fun callback. I like that.
Well, as Biff would say, we should make like a tree and get out of here.
Well, thank you all for listening. As always, we will end by telling you where to find us. So you can find me at Theme Park Workshop on Instagram. You can also find me at Theme Park Workshop on TikTok, Theme Park Workshop on Facebook. And then if you're looking for me specifically, you can find me at kellstuff.hoff on Instagram. And Adam, where can the people find you?
You can find me on the Patreon at patreon.com/themeparkworkshop. I'm putting up these episodes early. Sometimes they're not as early, but they are early before it comes out to the general audience. As well as bonus episodes, and that's where the real fun is at, getting these bonus episodes and give you updates on what's coming to the future.
Bella, where can the people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at FlyWritersNose, on Twitter at Bella Harvey with 2 Y's, but you can find me on the Theme Park Workshop Twitter, which is Workshop PP. Yeah.
Also, I I did forget to mention my Twitter. You can also find me on Twitter if you want to, at killer_Kells. I mention a lot of Horror Nights things and theme park things on there. But Dad, is there anywhere you want the people to find you? You could mention your podcast and anything else you want to promote.
I have 2 podcasts. My active podcast is Issues on Appeal. It's a podcast for appellate lawyers, mostly in Florida. So we have a really small audience, but if you're an appellate lawyer in Florida, you should check it out at issuesonappeal.com. And I also have an electric bike podcast we call Electric Bike Radio, which is electricbikeradio.com. And it's kind of in hiatus. My co-host has been notably absent, but we may try to get it going again soon.
And if you're someone who's wanting to learn about electric bikes, there's some great episodes on there that are very beginner friendly as well, and we'll give a lot of information on that. And
we have some cool evergreen content, yes, for sure.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for being there. Thanks for being a patron and supporting me and my friends. You know, I always appreciate that, and I know we all appreciate it. So thank you all for being here. If you haven't seen the Back to the Future movies, I'm looking at you, Bella. You better watch those. And then everybody who's listening, please write to Universal and tell them to bring this ride back for a limited time or forever. That'd be great. But I don't see that one happening. So I know we have to go into the future and go into kind of like we talked about, the 3rd generation of simulator or whatever type of ride or experience they want to put here. But this was great. And thank you for being here. And yeah, thanks everyone.